I never thought I'd be the kind of person to believe in Bigfoot until the night I hit one with my Chevy Silverado on a remote logging road in the Olympic Mountains of Washington State. What happened in the hours that followed taught me that some legends exist for a reason. It was November 1997. I was 43 years old, working as a field researcher for the Washington Department of Natural Resources. My job was to survey timber stands in remote areas, which meant I spent a lot of time alone on forgotten roads that hadn't seen traffic in months. I'd been doing this work for nearly 12 years, and I thought I'd seen everything these forests had to offer. Black bears, mountain lions, even a wolverine once, but nothing could have prepared me for that night. I remember the date exactly, November 18th, 1997. It was a Tuesday, and I was running late getting back to my truck after a long day, surveying old growth stands near Olympic National Forest. The sun sets early in late November in the mountains, and by 5:30 p.m., I was driving through complete darkness on a narrow dirt road that wound through thick stands of Douglas fir and western hemlock. My headlights cut through the autumn mist that had settled over everything like a cold, damp blanket. I had the radio tuned to a classic rock station, though the signal kept cutting in and out this deep in the mountains. One moment, the road ahead was empty, just two tire tracks disappearing into the fog. The next moment, something massive stepped out of the tree line directly into my path. I slammed on the brakes, but there wasn't enough time. The Chevy hit whatever it was with a sickening thud that I felt through the entire frame of the truck. The impact wasn't as severe as it could have been. I'd managed to slow down considerably, but it was enough to knock the creature off its feet. My truck skidded to a stop at an angle across the narrow road, the engine stalling out in the sudden silence. For a long moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, my heart hammering in my chest. Steam rose from the hood. The headlights pointed off into the trees at a crazy angle, casting strange shadows through the mist. I couldn't see what I'd hit. My first thought was that I'd struck a bear. But something about the size and shape of what I'd glimpsed in that split second before impact didn't quite fit. It had been tall, much taller than any bear I'd ever seen standing on its hind legs. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, debating what to do. Every survival instinct was screaming at me to restart the truck and get out of there. But my conscience wouldn't let me. If I'd hit an animal, I needed to at least assess the damage, see if it was suffering. I reached under my seat and pulled out my heavy-duty Maglite flashlight. Then I grabbed my first aid kit from behind the seat. I also took my can of bear spray from the door pocket and clipped it to my belt. The November air hit me like a wall of cold when I opened the truck door. It smelled like wet earth, pine needles, and something else, something musky and wild that I couldn't quite place. I stepped out onto the dirt road and swept the flashlight beam across the area in front of my truck. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I moved the light to the right toward the ditch that ran alongside the road. And that's when I saw it. My breath caught in my throat. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The creature lay on its side in the shallow ditch, partially covered by ferns and underbrush. It was massive, easily 7.5 feet tall, maybe 8. Its body was covered in dark reddish-brown hair that looked almost auburn in the beam of my flashlight. The hair was longer and shaggier than any bear's, hanging in thick tangles, matted with mud and forest debris. But it was the shape that made my stomach drop. The proportions were all wrong for a bear. The limbs were too long, too human, like in their structure. I could see one arm draped across its torso, and the hand looked almost human, but larger. With thick fingers and dark, leathery skin on the palm, I stood there, frozen, the flashlight trembling in my grip as my brain tried to reconcile what my eyes were seeing with what I knew to be possible. This couldn't be real. Bigfoot wasn't real. It was a legend, a myth. Except there was a body right in front of me. The creature's chest rose and fell with shallow, labored breaths. It was alive but clearly hurt. I could see where my truck had struck it. There was a darkening patch on its right shoulder and upper arm that looked like blood. I should have been terrified. Part of me was. But another part of me, the part that had spent 12 years studying wildlife, was absolutely mesmerized. And beneath both the fear and the fascination was something else, a growing sense of responsibility. I'd hit this creature with my truck. Whatever it was, I'd hurt it, and now it needed help. I took a cautious step closer, then another. The creature didn't move except for the rise and fall of its breathing. Up close, I could see more details. Its face was partially turned away from me, but I could make out a heavy brow ridge, a flat nose, and what looked like dark skin beneath the hair on its cheeks. The smell was stronger now, that musky, wild scent, but not unpleasant. It smelled like the forest itself, like moss and earth and rain. The creature's breathing became more ragged, and I noticed its shoulder was definitely injured. Dark blood matted the fur around the impact site. I knew I had to make a decision fast. Leave it here and drive away, pretending this never happened, or try to help it. I thought about my daughter Sarah back home in Olympia. She was 16, and she'd always loved nature documentaries. She believed in things like this, cryptids, unexplained phenomena. I'd always been the skeptical one, the scientist. If she could see me now, she'd never let me hear the end of it. The thought of Sarah made my decision for me. I couldn't leave this creature here to suffer, possibly die because of my truck. Whether it was a Sasquatch or some unknown primate species, it was a living being in pain, and I had caused that pain. I knelt down a few feet away from it, setting my flashlight on the ground so it illuminated the creature. My hands were shaking as I opened my first aid kit. I had bandages, antiseptic, gauze, all things meant for human injuries, but they'd have to do. I also had a couple of old wool blankets in my truck. The November night was getting colder. "Easy," I said softly. Not even sure why I was talking to it. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to try to help." I moved slowly, telegraphing every movement. The creature's eyes opened, and I found myself staring into the most remarkable eyes I'd ever seen. They were dark brown, almost black, but there was something in them that was unmistakably intelligent. Not animal intelligence, something more. Something that looked back at me with awareness and understanding. Those eyes tracked my movements as I carefully approached its injured shoulder. I could see the wound more clearly now. My truck's bumper had caught it hard, tearing through the thick hair and skin. The injury was bleeding, but not profusely. It looked painful, but probably not life-threatening if it didn't get infected. "I'm going to clean this," I said quietly, still maintaining that soft tone. "It's going to sting." I poured water from my canteen over the wound, washing away blood and debris. The creature tensed, and a low rumble came from deep in its chest, but it didn't pull away or try to strike me. It just watched me with those intelligent eyes. I applied antiseptic from my kit, apologizing as I worked. The creature's breathing quickened, but still it remained still, allowing me to treat the wound. I wrapped gauze around its massive shoulder as best I could, my human-sized medical supplies barely adequate for the task. When I finished, I sat back on my heels, exhausted from the adrenaline crash. The creature slowly pushed itself up to a sitting position, moving carefully because of the injured shoulder. We sat there in the mist and darkness, two beings that shouldn't have been sharing this moment, studying each other. I reached for my water bottle and took a drink. Then, on impulse, I held it out toward the creature. "Want some?" The creature's eyes moved from my face to the bottle. Slowly, carefully, it reached out with one massive hand and took the bottle from me. The gesture was so deliberate, so controlled, that it sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't an animal. This was something else entirely. It brought the bottle to its mouth and drank, tilting its head back just like a human would. When it finished, it lowered the bottle and looked at me again. Then it did something that made my heart nearly stop. It reached out with its free hand and gently touched my wrist, the one still extended from handing over the water bottle. The touch was brief, maybe 3 seconds, but unmistakable in its meaning. Thank you. I understood it as clearly as if the creature had spoken the words aloud. Then it handed the water bottle back to me and slowly stood. It was even more imposing, standing at full height, towering over me in the darkness. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The creature looked down at me one more time, those eyes holding mine, and then it turned and began walking toward the tree line. It moved with a slight limp, favoring its injured side, but with surprising grace for something so large. At the edge of the forest, just before the darkness swallowed it completely, the creature stopped and looked back. And then, slowly and deliberately, it raised one massive hand and moved it side to side in an unmistakable gesture. A wave. A farewell. I raised my own hand in response, my throat too tight to speak. The creature held my gaze for one more moment, then turned and disappeared into the forest. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of its movement growing fainter, until there was nothing but the wind in the trees and the distant call of an owl. Then I walked back to my truck, climbed in, and drove home in a daze. When I walked through my front door that night, Sarah was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up and her eyes widened. "Dad, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a long day in the field. Got the truck stuck in some mud. Had to spend a couple hours getting it out." She studied me for a moment. "You're sure that's all?" "I'm sure. Just tired." The next few weeks passed in a strange blur. I went back to work, completing my timber surveys, filing my reports. Everything was normal on the surface, but I couldn't stop thinking about that night on the logging road. I found myself researching Bigfoot sightings in my spare time, reading accounts from other people who claimed to have encountered these creatures. Most were obviously fabricated, but a few had a ring of authenticity that made me wonder. I never went back to that specific logging road, but I thought about it often. I wondered if the creature had healed properly, if it had family somewhere in those mountains, if it had returned to them with its own story about the night it encountered a human in early December. About 3 weeks after the incident, I received a package at my office. There was no return address, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside was a small cedar box. When I opened it, I found a single object, a stone. It was river smoothed, about the size of my palm, with an unusual pattern of lines etched into its surface, deliberate marks that formed a simple geometric pattern. There was no note, no explanation. I kept it on my desk, and sometimes when I was working late, I'd pick it up and turn it over in my hands, tracing the etched lines with my finger. I never figured out who sent it, but I had my theories. Sarah left for college the following fall, heading to University of Washington to study environmental science. On the day I helped her move into her dorm, she asked me about that night again. "You really did see something that night, didn't you? Last November, on that timber survey." I sat down the box I was carrying and looked at her. She was 17 now, about to start her own journey. She deserved honesty. "Yeah," I said, "I did. Was it what I think it was?" "I don't know what you think it was." She smiled. "Something amazing, something that doesn't fit into our neat scientific categories, something that reminds us that there are still mysteries in the world." "Yeah," I said, feeling something loosen in my chest. It was exactly that. Years later, after I retired from the DNR, I finally told the full story to Sarah. We were hiking together in the Olympics, and she was visiting from her job with the National Park Service. I told her everything. The impact, the creature lying in the ditch, those intelligent eyes, the way it drank from my water bottle, the touch of its hand on my wrist, the walk into the forest, that final wave goodbye. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "Thank you for telling me," she said finally. And thank you for not taking photos, for not trying to prove it, for just letting it be what it was. You're not disappointed. This could have been the discovery of your lifetime. No, she said, looking out at the forest around us, I think you did exactly the right thing. Some things are more important than discovery. Some things deserve to remain wild and free and mysterious. We sat there, listening to the stream and the wind in the trees, and I felt at peace for the first time since that November night. I'm 68 now, and that encounter happened 22 years ago. My memory isn't what it used to be. I forget names, lose track of dates, sometimes can't remember what I had for breakfast. But I remember every detail of that night with perfect clarity. I can still see those eyes watching me in the darkness. I can still feel the warmth of that hand on my wrist. I don't know if anyone will believe this story. I don't have proof. No photos or physical evidence beyond that etched stone, which could have come from anywhere. But I know what I experienced, and I know that somewhere in the deep forests of the Olympic Mountains, there are creatures living that science hasn't acknowledged, beings that exist in the spaces between the known and the unknown. Sometimes late at night, I think about going back to that logging road, walking into the forest and seeing if I could find where the creature disappeared. But I never do. That moment is complete as it is, perfect in its mystery. Some things should be left undisturbed. But every November, when the leaves turn and the mist settles over the mountains, I pour a glass of water and raise it toward the window, toward the distant peaks of the Olympics, a toast to a creature I met once on a foggy night, to a moment of connection between two beings that should never have met, and to the mysteries that still exist in the wild places of this world. I never believed in Bigfoot until the night I hit one with my truck. And what I learned in the hours that followed is that belief doesn't matter. What matters is respect, compassion, and the recognition that we share this world with wonders we may never fully understand.